The knock at midnight. The rain had started an hour ago, a steady downpour that drummed against the windows of my secluded cabin. The wind howled through the dense forest beyond, rattling the old wooden structure as if nature itself was trying to claw its way in. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced along the walls. I leaned back in my chair, an old leather-bound book resting on my lap, but I wasn't reading. My mind was elsewhere, always elsewhere. The ghosts of my past whispered through the quiet room, memories I had tried so hard to bury resurfacing like they always did when I was alone. It had been years since I ran, years since I left behind the only life I had ever known. I had been careful, so careful. I changed names, erased my records, disappeared into the forgotten corners of the galaxy. I convinced myself I was safe, that the past was just that, past. But deep down, I had always known this peace was an illusion, a lie I had desperately wanted to believe. Then it happened. A knock. A single deliberate knock against the wooden door. My heart stopped. For a moment, I told myself it was just the wind, a branch broken loose, or maybe an animal seeking shelter from the storm. But then it came again, more insistent this time. 3 sharp raps against the wood. A chill ran down my spine. I reached for the antique pistol on the mantel, my fingers tightening around the grip. My breathing slowed as I moved toward the door, my mind racing through every possibility, every scenario I had prepared for. And then I heard the voice. "Did you think you could escape from me?" The words cut through the storm like a blade, smooth and cold, sending a bolt of terror straight to my core. I knew that voice. I had spent years dreading it, praying I would never hear it again. I tightened my grip on the pistol and slowly unlocked the door. And there she stood. Ilara, the alien woman I had spent my life running from. Her tall, slender frame was silhouetted against the storm, her iridescent skin shimmering under the faint glow of the porch light. The rain clung to her like liquid mercury, cascading down her smooth, almost ethereal form. But it was her eyes, those piercing silver eyes, that sent a shiver through me. Eyes that held a dangerous mixture of triumph and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. I swallowed hard. "How did you find me?" She tilted her head slightly, a ghost of a smirk playing at the edges of her lips. "You should know by now, human. There is nowhere in this galaxy you can hide from me." She stepped forward, unbothered by the rain, unshaken by the howling wind. She moved like a predator, deliberate and calm, as if she had already won. I took a step back, keeping the pistol between us. She didn't flinch. "You've been running for a long time," she continued, her voice impossibly smooth, almost amused. "Did you really think it would last forever?" I didn't answer. My mind was racing. The last time I saw Ilara was on the mining colony of Silos 4. I had been a prospector, hunting for rare minerals on the farthest edges of known space. She had been a bounty hunter, sent to track me down for reasons I hadn't understood at the time. I had barely escaped her then, slipping through her grasp like smoke in the wind. But now she was standing in my doorway, rainwater pooling at her feet, staring at me like she was relishing this moment. "You know why I'm here," she said. I did. The artifact. The crystalline fragment I had stolen from Silos 4, the one that had been my salvation and my curse. I had thought it was just another rare mineral, something valuable enough to disappear with, something worth risking everything for. But I had been wrong. It wasn't just valuable. It was alive. And it wasn't just any artifact. It belonged to her people. I swallowed hard. "I don't have it." She arched an eyebrow, stepping further inside without waiting for an invitation. Her gaze swept over the small cabin, her expression unreadable. "Lying doesn't suit you." "I'm not lying," I said, keeping my voice steady. She took another step closer. I could see the faint luminescence of her skin, the way it seemed to shift and ripple with an otherworldly glow. "Then you won't mind if I take a look around." I stiffened. You think I'm just going to let you?" She let out a soft, humorless laugh. "You don't have much choice." She was right. If she wanted to tear this cabin apart, she could. If she wanted to kill me, I doubted the pistol in my hand would make a difference. But I wasn't about to go down without a fight. I took a slow step back, toward the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards where the crystal was buried. I needed time, just a little more time, to figure out what to do. But she saw it. Her silver eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time since I had met her, I saw something I had never expected. Not anger, not vengeance, but desperation. "You don't understand what you've taken," she said, and for the first time, her voice wasn't cold. It wasn't amused. It was pleading. I hesitated. I had spent years believing she was the villain. The relentless hunter chasing me across the stars, the inescapable shadow always one step behind. But in that moment, I saw something else, a truth I hadn't been willing to face. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't just about revenge. It was something far bigger, and I had just made the worst mistake of my life. A dangerous truth. The rain intensified, hammering against the cabin with relentless fury, as if the storm itself could sense the tension brewing inside. The dim glow of the fire cast long, flickering shadows across the wooden walls, painting the room in an eerie light. Ilara stood before me, her silver eyes unblinking, unwavering. I had spent years running from her, but now, standing face to face, something about her demeanor had changed. There was no rage, no smug satisfaction at finally catching me, only a quiet, unshakable determination. And something else, something I couldn't quite place. For the first time, she wasn't just a bounty hunter to me. She was desperate. "You don't understand what you've taken," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening on the pistol. I didn't trust her. How could I? She had hunted me across the stars, always one step behind, always there like a specter haunting my every move. And yet, something gnawed at me. She wasn't attacking. She wasn't threatening. She wasn't here to kill me. At least, not yet. I took a slow breath, keeping my distance. "Then explain it to me." Her silver gaze flickered to the floorboards. "You know where it is." I didn't answer. "You think it's just a relic, just another piece of rare treasure to be sold to the highest bidder." She took a step forward, the dim light casting a faint glow along her iridescent skin. "But it's not." My pulse pounded in my ears. I had always known the crystal was different. The moment I had found it buried deep in the caverns of Tsilos 4, something about it had called to me. I had ignored the warnings, the way it pulsed with an inner light, the way it seemed to whisper in the back of my mind. I had convinced myself it was valuable. I had convinced myself it was worth stealing. "What is it?" I asked, my voice low. Ilara exhaled slowly, as if she had been waiting for that question. She turned slightly, her gaze momentarily distant. "A fragment of my people's essence," she said. "Not a mere artifact. Not something you can simply trade away. It's part of us. A living memory. A history woven into light." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. I had thought I had stolen a prize, but I had stolen a part of them. She turned back to me, her expression unreadable. "Without it, my people cannot survive." I stared at her, my mind racing. She wasn't lying. I could feel it. I had carried that crystal for years, and in the dead of night, I had dreamed of things I didn't understand, of distant worlds swallowed by darkness, of voices crying out in an alien tongue, of entire civilizations reduced to nothingness. I had chalked it up to my imagination. Now, I wasn't so sure. Ilara took another step forward, her gaze locked onto mine. "You must return it." I hesitated. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head at once. If I gave her the crystal, this nightmare would end. I could go back to my life, what little of it was left. But something didn't sit right. If it was truly that important, then why had she chased me across the galaxy instead of simply telling me the truth from the start? I shook my head. You never explained. You never asked. You just hunted me. Her jaw tightened. Would you have listened? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe I was the kind of person who would have done the right thing from the start. But the truth? No, I wouldn't have. I had spent too long looking out for myself, surviving in the shadows, always one step ahead of the people who wanted me dead. And that was why this didn't make sense. If this crystal was so important, if it was a piece of her people's very existence, why was she alone? Where are the others? I asked suddenly. Her expression darkened. I saw it then, the flicker of something I had never expected. Pain. My world is gone. The words hung in the air like a weight crushing down on me. Gone. I frowned. What do you mean gone? She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her rain-dampened hair. You think I chased you out of greed, out of revenge. She let out a bitter laugh. I chased you because I am the last. My stomach twisted. The last. Ilara's silver eyes burned into mine. The crystal you stole wasn't just a relic of my people. It was the last remnant of them, the only piece left of what once was. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. I had stolen from a dying race, a race that no longer existed. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Ilara's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't have time to convince you, human. Others are coming. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Others? She nodded. The ones who destroyed my world. The room grew impossibly still. The floor creaked beneath my feet as I took a step back. You led them here. She shook her head. They were always following. I just hoped I could reach you first. A deep, terrible silence stretched between us. Then, a sound. A low, guttural hum. It resonated through the cabin, sending vibrations through the floor, rattling the windows. Ilara's eyes widened. They found us, she whispered. I turned toward the door just as the storm outside seemed to shift. The wind died instantly, the rain stopping mid-fall, as if the very fabric of reality had been frozen in time. And then, the door exploded inward. A blinding surge of energy tore through the room, splinters of wood scattering like shrapnel. I barely had time to react before the impact threw me backward, slamming me against the wall. Through the haze of dust and debris, I saw them. Dark figures, their exoskeletal armor glistening with an eerie insect-like sheen. Their eyes burned a sickly green, their elongated limbs moving with unnatural precision. 3 of them stepped into the ruined cabin, their weapons glowing with pulsing energy. Ilara was already moving. She lunged, her form a blur as she collided with the first intruder. A flash of silver, a sharp crack, and the creature crumpled to the ground. The second raised its weapon. I didn't think. I fired. The pistol's recoil kicked back against my hand as the bullet tore through the air, striking the creature dead center. It staggered, but it didn't fall. Their armor was strong. Too strong. I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering. The third figure turned toward me, its weapon charging with an ominous hum. And then, a sudden pulse, a familiar glow. I whipped my head toward the floorboards, where the hidden compartment now lay exposed. The crystal. Its light was growing stronger, reacting to the chaos, pulsing with an almost sentient energy. Ilara's voice rang out through the storm of battle. Get the crystal. Now. I didn't hesitate. I lunged toward it, just as the world erupted into chaos. The awakening of the crystal. The world around me had become a blur of chaos and destruction. The air crackled with energy, the scent of burning wood, and scorched ozone filling my lungs as I scrambled across the shattered floor. My ears rang from the explosion, my body still reeling from the impact. But none of that mattered. The crystal pulsed with a rhythm unlike anything I had ever seen before, alive, aware, reacting. Ilara fought with precision, her movements fluid and lethal. She was faster than I had ever seen before, almost a blur of silver and shadow as she weaved between the armored intruders. Her blade flashed in the dim light, striking with pinpoint accuracy, but the creatures were relentless. Their chitinous armor absorbed the blows that should have been fatal. The third intruder turned its sickly green eyes toward me. Its weapon, a long-barreled construct with glowing veins of pulsating energy, let out a low hum as it charged. I dove just as the shot blasted through the air, obliterating the wall behind me in a violent eruption of wood and debris. I hit the ground hard, my palms scraping against the rough floorboards, but my fingers closed around the crystal. The moment my skin made contact, a shockwave of energy surged through me. Not pain, something else. Memories. Not mine. Not human. Visions flooded my mind. A vast civilization stretching across the stars. Towers of crystalline architecture shimmering under twin suns. A people woven from light, their bodies both physical and energy, existing in harmony with the cosmos itself. And then, the darkness. A war, not fought with guns or ships, but with something deeper, more terrifying. A force that consumed, that corrupted. A sickness spreading across the stars, devouring everything in its path. The same creatures that stood before me now had once been something else. They had not always been monsters. They had been turned. The crystal had been their salvation, the last remnant of a world that had fallen to shadow. A fragment of a people that no longer existed, except in this one final sliver of light. And I had stolen it. I gasped as the vision ended, the weight of it all crashing down on me. My body trembled from the sheer magnitude of what I had just experienced. Ilara's voice cut through the storm of my thoughts. Run. I barely had time to react before she was beside me, her blade deflecting another energy blast meant for my head. The creature hissed, its insectoid mandibles clicking in fury as it advanced. Ilara grabbed my wrist and pulled me to my feet. You don't understand what you've done, she shouted over the chaos, her silver eyes wild with urgency. I did now. I understood too well. The crystal wasn't just an artifact. It wasn't just a remnant. It was a weapon. Or maybe something more. Ilara turned, slicing another enemy across its armored chest. It staggered but did not fall. There are too many of them, she growled, frustration seeping into her voice. I tightened my grip around the crystal, feeling its energy pulse beneath my fingertips. For years, I had feared Ilara. I had convinced myself she was my enemy. But she wasn't. They were. And if this crystal was the last hope of a lost civilization, if it held even a sliver of the power I had just felt, then I was done running. I took a deep breath. How do we use it? Ilara hesitated for half a second before realization dawned in her eyes. She didn't question why I had changed my mind. She just acted. Focus, she commanded. It's bound to you now. You've carried it for years. It will listen to you. I had no idea what that meant, but I didn't have time to doubt her. The creatures were closing in. The moment stretched impossibly long as I held the crystal tight in my grasp. It was warm now, alive. It recognized me. And then, a single word formed in my mind, not in English, not in any language I had ever spoken, but I understood. I spoke it. The cabin exploded with light. Not fire, not destruction. Pure, raw energy. The creatures screamed, their forms writhing in agony as the light engulfed them. Their armor cracked and shattered, their bodies convulsing as if something inside them was being burned away. And then, they were gone. The silence that followed was deafening. The walls of the cabin were scorched, the floorboards splintered. The rain outside had stopped entirely, the storm seemingly erased in the wake of whatever had just happened. I was still standing, breathing, heart pounding. Ilara's gaze was locked onto me, unreadable. I swallowed, my hands still trembling. Did I just? She exhaled slowly, nodding. You awakened it. I looked down at the crystal in my hand. The glow had dimmed slightly, but it was still warm, still humming with quiet power. I had spent years running from the past, but the past had just caught up with me. And now, there was no turning back. Ilara stepped forward, her expression softer than before. "You understand now, don't you?" I nodded. Yeah, the crystal wasn't just a remnant of her people. It was their legacy, and I had been chosen to carry it, whether I wanted to or not. Ilara turned toward the shattered doorway, scanning the empty night beyond. "We need to leave," she said. "They'll send more." I didn't argue, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just running. I was ready to fight. The hunt begins. The night stretched before us, vast and silent. The storm had vanished as if it had never existed, replaced by an eerie stillness. The air smelled of scorched wood and something else, something wrong. The crystal still pulsed in my hand, its glow dimmer now but alive, as though it were watching. Ilara stood at the threshold of the ruined cabin, her silver eyes scanning the tree line. She was motionless, her body coiled with a tension that set every nerve in my body on edge. "They'll be coming," she murmured. I swallowed, still trying to process everything. Just minutes ago, I had been running for my life, believing I was being hunted over a stolen artifact. Now, I knew the truth. This wasn't just a relic. This was the last hope of a dying civilization. And those creatures, those things, weren't just bounty hunters or mercenaries. They were something far worse. They weren't always like that, were they? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ilara turned slightly, her gaze sharp. "No, they were once, like us, like you." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Once, long ago." The vision I had seen when I touched the crystal flashed in my mind again. A world swallowed by darkness. A people twisted into something unrecognizable. It hadn't just been conquered. It had been consumed. I shuddered. What happened to them? She was quiet for a long moment before answering. "They touched the void," she said finally, "and it changed them." The void, the abyss between stars. A force older than time, nameless and endless. It doesn't just kill, it devours. It takes everything you are and leaves behind. Nothing. No soul. No will. Just hunger. A chill crept up my spine. "You're saying something out there. Did this to them." She nodded. "And now it's spreading." My grip on the crystal tightened. "And this thing, this fragment, can stop it?" "Yes." That single word carried the weight of a dying civilization. I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. I had spent years running, surviving, thinking only of myself. But now, standing in the ruins of my past, I had the chance to do something that mattered. I wasn't ready for it, but I couldn't ignore it either. Ilara turned back toward the trees. "We need to move. Now." I nodded. "Where are we going?" She gave me a sideways glance. "Off-world." I blinked. "You have a ship." She smirked. "Of course. Did you think I'd walked here?" Despite everything, I almost laughed. "Come on." She started toward the forest, moving fast. I followed, my pulse pounding. We ran. The night was quiet, but not empty. The further we moved from the cabin, the stronger the feeling of being watched grew. Every rustling leaf, every shifting shadow set my nerves on fire. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their branches twisted in unnatural shapes. The silence wasn't natural, it was wrong. Then, a clicking sound in the distance. Ilara stopped. I froze beside her. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was them. Ilara's posture changed, her muscles tensing. Her fingers brushed the hilt of the curved blade at her side. "They're tracking us," she whispered. I swallowed. "How many?" A pause. "More than we can fight." That wasn't comforting. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "You need to trust me." I hesitated. A few hours ago, I wouldn't have even considered it. But now, I met her gaze and nodded. She didn't waste time. "Hold on," she commanded. Before I could ask what she meant, she grabbed my wrist and pulled. The world blurred. 1 second, we were standing in the forest. The next, we were moving faster than my mind could process. The trees became streaks of color, the wind screaming in my ears. My stomach lurched, my vision darkening at the edges. It felt like reality itself had tilted. Then, we stopped. I stumbled forward, barely catching myself before collapsing to the ground. My entire body felt like it had been turned inside out. What the hell was that? I gasped. Ilara let go of my wrist. Short-range phase shift. Not pleasant, but effective. "You think?" She smirked, but didn't respond. Instead, she gestured ahead. I followed her gaze and froze. There, half buried in the dense undergrowth, was a ship. It wasn't large, but it was sleek. Its dark, metallic hull was covered in strange markings that pulsed with faint blue light. The design was unlike anything I had ever seen before, angular, almost organic in the way the panels curved. It looked ancient, but powerful. "This is yours?" I asked. She nodded. "It's the last of its kind. Just like me." A pang of something unfamiliar twisted in my chest. I had spent years running, believing I was alone. But Ilara, she had lost everything. And she was still fighting. I took a deep breath. "Then let's get out of here." She nodded once and moved toward the ship, pressing her hand against a barely visible panel. The metal shimmered beneath her touch, and with a low hiss, the door slid open. A ramp extended downward, revealing the dimly lit interior. I followed her inside. The moment my feet touched the floor, the door sealed shut behind me. For the first time in years, I was leaving Earth. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away. I was running toward something. I had no idea where this would lead. I had no idea if we would even survive. But I knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning.